Here we are. Let's take a deep breath. It's Edgar Snowden hour. The prism is on. You're being photographed, so take a deep breath. We'll be checking your records at Bluffdale. My perfect audience. Listen, because I got a tale to tell today. I want to talk about friends who are no longer friends. I want to talk about Barry Goldwater. Barry Goldwater is an insurance agent. Don't buy insurance from him. I did. He was a friend of mine. He was in my men's group too. The same group that Terry Hunt, yes, that Terry Hunt, of the Hunt brothers' fortune. Terry Hunt, who didn't appear at the last of the 10 years of that men's group. I could not believe that. All that remained at that point was my friendship with Barry Goldwater and Victor Young. Victor Young never called me. I called him a bunch of times, but he never called me, but I don't mind. He's out there somewhere. But Barry Goldwater stayed a friend of mine. He stayed a friend of mine because, well, he was fun, I gotta say. And I liked his mother. His mother and I spoke Yiddish together, though I don't, halavai, speak too much Yiddish. She spoke not too much Yiddish either, but a lot more than I did. But it was fun. It was fun hanging out with his mother, and it was fun hanging out with him, especially because since I bought my insurance, he was nice to me for a long time. Gave me some clothes, some things. Used to turn me on, and back in the day, back in them days when I used to use chocolate and sponsorship. We used to talk about sponsorship, and he always had some sponsorship. Of course, that gave him some problems, but those were his problems. And I do remember he used to tell some good stories. He was from New York, and he was a pretty New Yorkish kind of Yankee kind of person. And I was kind of a Red Sox kind of person. And he had his friend Woody. And Woody and he fell out and then fell back in again. I don't know if they're in or out now. But Barry and I fell out when I used to, because he did some nice things for me. Sponsored me. Gave me some nice clothes that he didn't want. But he never valued my friendship, really. So when it came down to a point where he wanted to go from being an insurance agent, he had all kinds of schemes to get more business, and he was always trying to get business. And I introduced him to a couple of friends of mine, and he got a little bit of business on my recommendation, got him in the door. He used to talk a lot about selling. He'd been a radical, but a radical who was still radical in some ways, but had flipped around to making money and cheating. He used to cheat on his spouse. Wasn't very nice, but that wasn't any of mine. And I know to this day he's probably still doing it, because he had this hookup in Russia. Went out to Russia. Never told who he was with. I thought that was a little weird. And not, maybe a little uncomfortable, but, you know, with a little sponsorship and chocolate, I let it go. I mean, what could I do? I wasn't going to preach no morality. Ain't that moral a person myself? You know Edgar Snowden. Did some stuff against the law and PRISM. But sometimes the law is unjust, criminally so. I'm taking a deep breath, and I suggest you do the same. And let's go with because Barry Goldwater wasn't exactly that same Barry Goldwater who got sponsored by the John Birch Society. No sirree, Bob. This was more of an SDS, black sheep Barry Goldwater. Black sheep until he tried to make money selling insurance, and did. He was a pretty good insurance guy. I had no complaints. But when I fell out with him, it wasn't after the men's group that we were in together for 10 years. I think Terry Hunt brought him in because he was a kind of flunky for Terry Hunt. Terry bought some insurance from him. And Elliot did his teeth, I think. Elliot was in our group too. Well, anyway, that ended, and didn't end too happily. But, you know, those things do end, and we had 10 years of men's group together, and everybody said they wanted it to keep going. And I remember Terry Hunt, the time before that last meeting, said we would never end. But then when it turned out we were going to end, Terry Hunt that last night, he didn't appear. I could not believe that. Still cannot. I ran into Terry Hunt in the Star Market near Mount Auburn Cemetery once. And he wanted a hug and say hello. I don't know, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. It was a little bit like Joel Ziff. You know, seeing him like I do now, sometimes on along the Charles. Also once a friend of mine, then not, then just not. And that had a whole other story behind it. But Barry Goldwater. So I recommended him to Lisa, my friend Lisa T. And I recommended him as a financial analyst. He wanted to be a financial analyst and not just an insurance flunky. He had all kinds of ideas and schemes and webinars going on. Probably still does. You could probably Google Barry Goldwater. See that mushroom cloud that rose up around him. But you wouldn't find out about that Russian. You wouldn't find out about her. And I guess that's all well and good. He's doing whatever he does. Keep it all secret. Keep it all compartmentalized like he liked to do. And I remember him telling the story about LSD and taking LSD with his ex-wife. And that LSD, as back in the day, sometimes had some ketamine in it. Ketamine and quaaludes in it. And he talked the story. He was funny as hell when he liked to talk. He was funny as hell talking about the time they all took this acid that had this heavy dose of ketamine and quaaludes in it. I think they told him it was rainbow. But it was rainbow with rainbow plus plus, a little bit like C plus plus. You know what that's like. Don't mind if you want to take a deep breath and ohm away. 'Cause you own ear which you owe me. You owe me Edgar, the Arminator. We go round 36 deep breaths every day. Today I got there. Whoa, yo, done it. Today, got to 36 and then 5. I'm pretty proud of that. It's been over a week since I got to 36, bird by bird. But I keep going. I keep going. It's all in the words. So anyway, I recommended Barry Goldwater to that as a financial analyst, because Lisa T was looking for a financial analyst, and she asked on the D&E list for a recommendation. And I wrote to her, hooked her up with Barry Goldwater. I don't know if anything ever came of it, but as a result, Barry invited me over. And not only that, but I just had my bike stolen. And it was a bummer having my bike stolen. And I was going to buy another bike, and Barry very sweetly said he would buy that bike. If I found one, he'd buy it. And sure enough, it was a hard time for me, but I went online, bought a bike from a guy. Turned out to be a really lousy bike. It's still floating around somewhere, 150 bucks. Ugh, you get taken sometimes. And I got taken by that guy. I'm just taking it in. I'm a little ashamed to have been taken by the alpha dog. Should have said no, but I thought I needed to go ahead and pull the trigger, and I did. But Barry Goldwater, good enough, as good as his word, gave me a check for $150. Well, it was a bad time for me. Those were really bad times. And in those bad times, I was riding along Mass Ave, dropped my wallet. Ugh. Had to replace everything. And that $150 check was in there. And I called Barry Goldwater, said that if it got cashed, I guess I'd lose it. But it never got cashed. As well you would imagine, only it was made out to me, so you would have had to take a big chance to cash that check. But it came around, it circled around after the time I recommended Lisa T to him and went over his house because he invited me over for a little chocolate and sponsorship. And we did our chocolate and sponsorship. And I was kind of looking for the right moment, and we had a reasonable time. We had, as we sometimes did, had a little back and forth. You know how alpha male, top dog, Y chromosome, type A people kind of interact. Sometimes it's a little push and bump. We bumped up a little bit, but it was friendly. It was friendly right till the end, when I asked him to, because it had been long enough and the check hadn't been cashed, I asked him to, because he'd said he would, write another check. And I told him that if somehow that first check got cashed, I'd give him that back. So I asked him to write a check, and he said no. I took a deep breath. And I looked at Barry Goldwater, and I said to him, Barry, You promised me that $150 to buy that bike, and I bought it because you promised. And he said, I'm not going to write you that check. And I said, Barry, that feels like a break. Feels like you don't value my friendship, even $150. Because I don't know how I can be friends with you, or why I recommended Lisa T, who you may or may not get no business from, but you did get some business from my other friends. A couple of them, I think. And I introduced you around. But never mind, Barry, I'm just saying, think about it. Think about whether you want to write that check or not. Because if you don't write that check, I can't see how we're going to be friends. Barry didn't say nothing. And I remember leaving that day, thinking, I just ended a friendship. I felt pretty good. I felt pretty good because I'd said it aloud, that that's what was happening. Gave him the choice. It was a yes or no choice. Yes, I value the friendship enough to rewrite that $150 check that I promised, because he did promise. But he didn't do that. I don't know what was going on to this day. I wrote him an email after. Wasn't that friendly. Wasn't friendly at all, really. And I don't remember if he wrote back or not. But I think about Barry Goldwater now, because I enjoyed some of them stories about that time he took acid and had the ketamine and the quaaludes in it with his ex-wife. And she was freaked out. None of them could move. There was a bunch of them took that acid together. None of them could move, and he just talked her down. Kind of, if we're gonna die, this is the time. Strychnine too, I think it had in it. Strychnine did some funny things to you back in the day when there wasn't no quality control. You know how that is. Pretty hard to have some quality control. Well, the rainbow and the window pane, it all gets me thinking. Barry Goldwater gets me thinking of Mariba and getting Mariba-fied. Because those things happen. They're breaking points. Things that you can't support. Had that with my brother Bobby, too. When my mother died 2 years ago. Haven't spoken to Bobby since. Boy, he was awful. Awful. And that happens. You know how you fall out of touch? I'm thinking of Pat Coffey, too, who I asked to call me sometimes, too. To call me sometimes, to initiate contact. But he couldn't do that. So we've fallen out of touch. Disappoints me, because these are people who I once thought would be part of my 36, you know, the Lamadvovniks. Them just people. Them who value you. Here at Hamlin, at the Buddhist Artists Home for the Hospiceless. And we're going to need that. We're going to need people who get it and got your back. Because times is doubled down bad. And it's getting worse, the Holocene. It's a little hotter today, but right up here in the Northeast, we're in a corner where we don't got no Karachi weather. We don't got no 1,000 dead and 113 degrees Fahrenheit. And we don't got no California mega drought and all the water infrastructure that depended on the snowpack in the Sierra Nevada. We don't got none of that. So we got it easy, and I'm grateful, and you got to be grateful. And I had my meeting today with Linda in La La Land. And we're working on stuff. We're talking stuff over. I appreciate that she came back after a 4.5-year hiatus. Barry Goldwater also knew my son, who's doing good, by the way. Thank you for asking. Thank you very much. I'm taking a deep breath because it could be otherwise, and I'm glad it's not. I'm glad he's doing good. It's luck. It's the luck of the draw, and you don't got control. That's what you come to find out as time goes on, as you become 69 and things flip over, get upside down and inside out. Inside you, there's I read, TPP. It's not that TPP, not the Trans-Pacific Partnership that just got passed. It's going to further erode the American economy. No, it ain't that TPP. It's Tantric Practice Partnership. At the ROR, TORE, that's Revelatory Orgasmic Reality, Tantric Orgasmic Reality, Enlightenment. And those of us with license to license, us 36, and you're invited, my perfect audience. If you get it, if you're one of us, if you'd like to join, if you'd like to practice intention and intuition, be my guest, my oirech. It's a host and guest kind of thing. It's a cum si, cum sa. It's a black and white. Schwarze, please. Habibi, beschert. Us 36, we worship the goddess. God-S. Because after all, how could it be so monopolar that there was only this type A, Y chromosome God? You wouldn't think it'd work like that. Because those gods are all about alpha males. And you know you can't get very far if you only got alpha males. You really need some other male persons. And you need some good stuff to happen. You need to be taking a deep breath and wondering exactly how it is that we've got here. It's not working. With 2020 hypo hindsight, you begin to notice that the resource allocation is all askew. Them venture capitalists, they're like 90%, maybe even more, 94% now male. Hungry ghosts, tortured spirits, male prerogatives. Parech, paranoid. Putzes and pussies, you never know how it all goes. But that's the bad thing about the panspermic and panchronic species. We are a ghost species, relics of the Holocene. The holocide is happening. And we're not talking pornography, gloom, doom paradigms. You keep it up, they give you something to cry about. 1 minute left. I'm taking a deep breath. Can you tolerate the pleasure? Let me just leave you with that question to ponder until we speak again. Can you tolerate the pleasure? Oh.